Okay, what's up, everybody? What's up? The goal of this presentation is to clarify certain details concerning the origins of the transatlantic slave trade. So, very often, when this topic is debated online, people often talk about the 1600s, particularly when we're talking about the Anglo-Saxon sphere of influence. People tend to believe that the transatlantic slave trade began in the 1600s, but that is not accurate. Uh, what I want to establish is the connection between the origins of the transatlantic slave trade and the Reconquista in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, uh, because in a certain way, the Portuguese expansion, maritime expansion in the 1400s, was a direct consequence of the transatlantic, was a direct consequence of the Reconquista in the Iberian Peninsula and the wars fought between the Christian kingdoms and the Muslim kingdoms in the Iberian Peninsula. So let's take a look. Let's take a look. So as I've said before, 1400s Reconquista. Now look at this map. Okay, let's look at this map. You look at this map, and what do we see? On the western part of the Iberian Peninsula, we have the Kingdom of Portugal. Okay, now the Kingdom of Portugal, their reconquest or their reconquista was already complete by 1249 AD. Okay, so King Afonso III conquered the southern region of Portugal, which is now, if you look at the map, you will see Algarve. Yeah. If you look at my presentation, you will see the name Algarve, which was the Muslim name given to the southern part of Portugal. Yeah. And so yes, King Afonso was the one. King Afonso III was the one that conquered Algarve. Yeah. And so, in comparison, if we look at the kingdom of Castile, yeah, you see that there is still, up until 1492, there is still a Muslim kingdom, which is called the Kingdom of Granada. Okay, and Granada only falls to the Christian kings in 1492. So there is more than 100, almost 150 years difference between the Reconquista in Portugal and the Reconquista in the Kingdom of Castile. And why am I talking about this? Because this shows how the Portuguese uh, had a certain advantage over the Spanish in the 1400s. You know, the Spanish were still worried about conquering the Kingdom of Granada, while the Portuguese had already finished their Reconquista, or the Kingdom of Portugal had already finished what 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 their Reconquista was, and they could already focus on expanding in the seas. You know? So this is very important. This is very important for us to understand why the Portuguese had an advantage over the Spanish in the 1400s. Okay. Okay, so now we are in 1415. 1415. And this is the point where the Portuguese really start to expand on the African continent. Yeah. So in 1415, the Portuguese, they will launch a massive military expedition to conquer the city of Ceuta in modern day Morocco. The city till this day still is it's really Spanish territory in Morocco, because in the 1600s the Portuguese made a deal with the Spanish, where the Spanish received this city, yeah, in the 1600s. But in 1415, the city was conquered by Portuguese for a lot of reasons. Okay, there were economic, ideological, and religious motives. So if we go to the economic motives, at this particular point, Ceuta used to be a transit point for caravans from sub-Saharan Africa and from the Middle East. Okay, because it's important to realize that at this stage, in the 1400s, Europeans already knew about the great Mansa Musa. Okay, and a lot of gold from Mali would end up in northern Africa. So it's important to keep this in mind. So yes, on one hand, there was the fact Portugal was a net importer of wheat, which was produced in abundance by North Africans. On the other hand, there were the ideological and religious motives, because the Christian kingdoms of Portugal were, so modern day Portuguese and Spaniards, they are descendants of the Visigothic kingdoms. The Visigoths. The Visigoths were some of the barbarians. They were called barbarians by the Romans. They were some of the barbarians that lived in the Iberian Peninsula. But these barbarians, they converted to Christianity. And so there was a time when North Africa was Christian, and so that resulted in these Iberian Christian kingdoms feeling like they should conquer North Africa. And so 1415 is the date when the Portuguese really start expanding in Africa. Okay. So this is just a picture of King John the First. In Portuguese they call him, or in Portugal they call him King João the First. Yes, who had three sons, and Henrique, or Henry the Navigator, would be the most famous one, even though he wouldn't become the king. But Henry the Navigator, he was the one that belonged to the Order of Christ, which was an order that kinda was funded by some of the Templars that fled France after their fall, because the Templars, after they fell in France, some of them went to Malta, some went to Scotland, where they supposedly, or where they allegedly started the so-called Freemasons, and some of them went to Portugal. Okay, and Henry the Navigator belonged to the so-called Order of Christ. Okay, but in this picture, this is allegedly King John the First, or King João o Primeiro. Okay, so this is a very interesting map right here, because in this map we see certain key dates. So let me take a step back. After the Portuguese conquered Ceuta in 1415, they adopted a dual policy where they would maintain some military presence in northern Africa, and at the same time they would have their navigators exploring the West African coast. And so as you can see, for example, by 1435 they arrived at Angra dos Ruivos. So Gil Eanes and Afonso Gonçalves Baldaia, they arrived at Angra dos Ruivos, 1435, modern day West Africa. By 1441 they arrived at Cape Blanco, which is which is kind of like modern day Mauritania. Yes, and 1445 they arrived at Arguin. Okay, and from this point on they would circumnavigate, or they would explore the entire West African coast. Now 4041 is a special date because this is the first time where they would actually manage to capture Africans in this area. You know, it said they would capture here the people from the so-called Azanegi tribe, which are kind of similar to the modern day Tuaregs. Okay, so yeah, at this point when they captured an African chieftain, so-called Adahu, and they took him to Portugal, southern Portugal. And in Portugal there were Portuguese that spoke Arabic, because you got to keep in mind that whenever, for example, a Christian kingdom conquered some land in the Iberian Peninsula, the rulers got expelled, but there were always a portion of the population that remained there and intermixed with the Christians, which is why if we were to do a genetic analysis from modern day Spaniards and Portuguese, a lot of them have abundant North African DNA. Of course, after they started invading sub-Saharan African territories, they obviously intermarried also with a lot of people from those regions, which resulted in them having a lot of African DNA. But even before that, there was already a lot of African DNA in the Iberian Peninsula, even after the fall of all Moorish kingdoms. Okay, the last kingdom to fall was the kingdom of Granada in 1492, which was the same year Christopher Columbus navigated to the Americas. But a lot of people from this area, or from the Iberian Peninsula, do have African genetics, okay, African bloodline. But yeah, going back to the topic, they supposedly captured Adahu in 1441. Adahu, they managed to communicate with Adahu. Adahu promised them gold and slaves, and so they brought Adahu back to Cape Blanco, okay, modern day Mauritania. Adahu managed to escape, but the Portuguese were still able to make deals with Tuaregs, or let's say African kind of Moorish tribes, you know, Muslims in this region of Africa, which brought to them Africans from the Senegambia region, okay, dark-skinned Africans from the Senegambia region. And from this point on, the Portuguese would start to traffic Africans from West Africa to southern Portugal, okay. And so these are the early beginnings of the Atlantic. I wouldn't call transatlantic, because at this point no European had arrived in America, at least officially, or in the American continent. But at this point they started to traffic human beings. The Portuguese started to traffic human beings from West Africa to Europe, okay, 4041, pivotal point. And so let's end this presentation right here, and I'm just showing you guys this map. This map was made by a some Jewish cartographer. I forgot the name, but regardless, this was made in the 1300s. And if you look at the right side, you see a black guy holding gold, and this is Mansa Musa. So once more, the Europeans already knew of African riches. They already knew Africa was a very rich continent in the 1300s. So don't be fooled by those people saying sub-Saharan Africa wasn't connected to the rest of the world before Europeans started to invade those territories, because that ain't true. Okay, that ain't true. They knew about African gold in the 1300s. Okay, it wasn't only the Arabs that knew about it. Europe knew, and they heard stories about Mansa Musa. Okay, so yeah, I'll finish my presentation here, and I will upload some more historical content in the future.